Welcome to the Elevate podcast. Insane energy prices on the way. Today, it was announced by Ofgem that energy bills will go up 80%. That's 80% on the 1st of October 2022 in the UK, which will take the average annual energy bill in the UK to over £3,500. That means that most Brits will be paying £300 per month for gas and electricity, with even further rises anticipated in 2023 that could see annual costs double to over £6,000 per year. This is an insane rise. Now, in our recent episode, the Heat and Eat episode, we covered why some of the prices have gone up, but we'll recap. But the Ofgem energy regulator has increased the price cap, and what that means is it's the price cap by which the energy suppliers themselves are able to charge, because ultimately what's causing the charges to go up is the wholesale energy market. So the way that energy, the buy and supply, the supply and demand works in the market means that if there is a constraint to the supply or an increase in demand, then like any traded good, the price will go up as demand rises or supply falls, or a combination of both. And over the last couple of years, we've seen both a supply constraint and a demand rise due to colder winters in Asia. But really what's happening with the situation in Russia means that now, due to political decisions, that most of the supply going into Europe from Russia, bearing in mind that Europe gets predominantly about 40% of its gas from Russia, the self-sabotaging in an attempt to curb the conflict in Ukraine. Clearly, it's not working. Clearly, the sanctions, clearly the approaches around suppression of energy is having virtually no impact upon the situation in Ukraine. Yet all of us are going to be suffering the consequences. So you've got to really start to think about what. We're seeing political action on the bills, but ultimately we need to start taking political action on the decisions that political leaders are making that are resulting in these problems, not to mention the profiteering that's occurring during this time. Huge record profits being made. Now, Sunak has announced a windfall tax that will make some difference. The government is offering some relief to the hardest hit, but ultimately, with a rise of this extent, everyone is going to feel it. 300 quid a month on energy alone. That's a significant amount of cash to pay every single month as a result of what's been going on. So the reality in Britain is that we are too dependent upon overseas supply. When I grew up down in Devon, there was a gigantic gas storage unit on the way into Torquay from Paignton, where I lived. That got dismantled. Many of the UK's gas storage centres were taken down over the last 10, 15 years, which means that even when Britain was producing an insane amount of gas earlier this year, we didn't have the ability to store it. If you actually look at the short-term gas prices in the UK, we actually hit some recent lows earlier in the year. But the way energy companies purchase gas and electric is over a longer period of time. So even though we benefited from an increase in gas supply earlier in the year, we couldn't really benefit from it on the basis that it came at a time where we don't need it. It comes at a time where we're in the summer. So the supply is constrained. We're seeing the supplies being restricted coming out of Russia, not to mention that the Nord Stream is going to be shut down from the 31st of August. Russia have announced this, from the 31st of August to the 2nd of September for maintenance, supposedly. Now, I don't dispute that maintenance will be required, but there is obviously a potential political action to this, which could be Russia sending a message to Europe. But ultimately, the reality is this. Britain, the headlines around Britain only importing around 3 to 4% of gas from Russia is pointless to say such things, because the reality is this: if Europe is getting 40% of its supply from Russia, then we're all competing. All the nations are competing for constrained supply. So clearly, it's going to have a knock-on effect on every country. So this is a political decision that we're facing this. So yes, we can ask the government to dole out more money, and that's one thing, but we're ultimately going to pay for that in taxes over the long term. What we ought to be doing is putting the pressure on governments for the areas of their ways. Let's get the gas lines reopen again. It's all very well talking about renewables, but if we haven't got immediate access to energy to deal with the supply scarcity, then we're all just going to suffer. And the reality is, when people go into fuel poverty, and it's predicted that 9 million homes in the UK this winter, 9 million will go into fuel poverty because of this. People will suffer. People's health will suffer. Their mental health will suffer. And that's just going to have huge ramifications. Now, let's get real as well when it comes to rising gas prices. The conversation right now is around inflation, okay? Yes, inflation is rising. No surprises. Gas is going up. The electric prices is going up significantly. It is the primary driver of inflation. Now, putting up the Bank of England interest rate, which is the stock response to inflation, to me is ludicrous, because we're not witnessing inflation due to an unprecedented level of economic growth spiraling out of control. We're seeing, yes, this is a rant-a-thon, Maria. Yes, thanks for the comments. This is a rant. I'm fired up because the problems we are witnessing are all political decisions. Putting the interest rate up makes sense if you're trying to maintain control over inflation that's driven primarily by economic growth. We're not seeing economic growth at scale. We're seeing the price of energy increase. Now, the problem is, of course, inflation is going to go up. We're not seeing, and again, inflation is measured almost, it's this arcane view of like having a basket of goods. Imagine you're at your local supermarket, your basket of things, and the average price of all those things measured over time gives you it's not limited to your retail shopping. Don't get me wrong, don't misquote me on this. But the ultimate piece is that there's a selection of goods that are collected every single month, and the overall price represents the rate of inflation. Now, of course, if one of those major goods goes up at a significant rate, clearly what happens is you get inflation. Now, if you're increasing interest rates, what does that do? Well, it makes the cost of borrowing more expensive. If you are trying to grow your economy, then the price of borrowing affects economic growth because businesses will be less inclined to borrow. But also, we notice that people on variable rate borrowing, whether that's credit cards, mortgages, and other debt, their outgoings will also go up, whether that's individuals, households, or businesses again. So clearly that's going to put additional pressure on people's finances. But let's get real about the energy alone. Think about it. So it's not just households' energy bills that are going up. All the businesses' energy bills are going to be going up. So that means, of course, we're going to see double-digit inflation, because what happens? Do you think the business is just going to sit there and leave their prices as they are with their outgoings going up significantly? No, of course they're not. They're going to put the prices of their goods up in order to stay in business. So what happens then? Guess what? You and I, we go to the shop, we pay more for everything from food to anything else because the energy supply being constrained and the rising cost of the energy means that everything becomes more expensive. So then the Bank of England next month, what they'll do again, inflation's on the rise, we better put interest rates up. No, the economy isn't growing. The cost of energy is going up. So let's tackle that problem. Let's tackle that specific issue, which isn't easy, by the way. I've been looking at this from every which angle. It's not an easy problem. It's a systemic problem that Britain is suffering. We don't have enough, and the idea that we are self-sufficient as a nation is just a fallacy. We import quite a bit of our energy in the UK. In fact, I did have the figures here. It's a reasonable amount. If anyone knows the amount, put it in the chat. But Britain still imports a lot of its energy, so we're not self-sufficient. So we have to import it from elsewhere. But of course, when a resource is scarce, other countries are competing for scarce resources. They're all trying to take care of their own citizens and making sure that their nation has enough energy supply. So of course, it's going to further drive up the prices. So it's a vicious cycle. So unless there is a means to prevent the energy prices from continuing to rise, which under the current market forces, and it's literally just supply and demand, some of the companies are profiting from this and profiteering, and the windfall tax will make a bit of an impact on that. I noticed that British Gas are self-imposing a windfall tax. They've created a fund. They've taken 10% of their profits and they're putting it into a fund for those hardest hit. But the reality is, it's the market that's driving this problem. It's not costing the generators more to make to produce the energy, but it's literally supply and demand. It's the market. Now, I'm a long-term, entrepreneur, supporter of business, advocate of free markets. But in times like this, you think, goodness me, the market is out of control. Theoretically, the market will produce optimal supply and demand to allocate goods efficiently and determine the price. However, free markets are subject to manipulation, misinformation, asymmetry of power, and dodgy political decisions, it seems. So it's really a complex issue, because I can't spend 2 years advocating for minimal government interference and then start advocating for maximal government interference. Or can I? Because here's part of the problem in the way that we do politics. That we've talked about left and right here on the podcast. We do this or that. Oh, we're either pro free market, or we're over here some more interventionist approach. Well, why don't we just take the problem as it is and put all our kind of political leanings aside and just determine what the best solution is for any given problem, rather than any politically belief-driven, almost religious style belonging to any political ideology? Wouldn't it be amazing as humans if we could just take any given situation and be like, well, this could be the best thing to do in this situation? But I don't know what the best thing to do in this situation is. But what is evident, as with most things right now, is that we have major corporations making a huge amount of money. We have politicians greasing the wheels for big companies to make even more money. We have politicians who are literally sleeping at the wheel, and there is no further hope that anyone, whether it's Sunak or Truss, there's no even any rumblings of what they're going to do here. We really do need some creative thinking about how we live our lives. This is ultimately what it comes down to. And one of my philosophies in business was this: is that don't waste time trying to knock down other people's towers, i.e., someone else is building a business. Don't go out there criticizing what they're doing. Focus on building your own. And in this case, I think there is an element of truth to that in terms of the political domain, because if we want things to change, then we have to bring the change. So it's evident at the national level that the UK needs to become more self-sufficient when it comes to energy, so we don't become so dependent on overseas supplies. But that's that mentality, by the way, over the course of country by country, is going to see, we're going to see a greater localization of or nationalized approaches to energy, which in some ways is beneficial to the individual state. But actually, when we live in a global economy, some of that has to continue to flow in order to make sure that that other people in other nations don't suffer if there's an undersupply in one area. But nonetheless, we also then need to see localized supply when it comes to our own regions, localities. And there is some amazing work being done, I've noticed in the last few months, where people are actually creating energy sovereignty by producing energy locally in their own area. And I think we just got to rethink. We've got to rethink how the whole system works. Because we're constantly stuck in this idea of the status quo and maintaining things as they are. And the reality is, when it comes to situations like this, they become so painful. People get so angry. We want to protest, tear down the government, riots in the street. They're coming. Yeah, back in January and February, if those of you who are part of the Elevate network, if you're on our early calls earlier this year, we predicted that by come September, October, there'd be riots in the United Kingdom. I still maintain that. Sadly, I don't want to see riots. I understand the energy, but actually that intention would be much better off placed into solutions that we can actually take upon ourselves and actually transmute that anger and rage and fury and despair into creativity. Because when it comes to creativity, when it comes to our own ingenuity, when it comes to our ability to transcend our problems, when we can elevate beyond the current situation, when we can elevate beyond the political domain, we can start to think creatively and actually developing our own solutions. We can think about things differently. Now, okay, that's not going to pay your bills this month. It's not going to pay your bills this winter. But someone at some point has to say, how are we going to do this differently over the long term? Because the political game and the business game is rigged for short-term thinking. It's rigged to maximize the situation. People are maximizing the situation right now. We need to think differently about this. Some of us have to take stock and think, what can we do on a local level? And then some of that might be going back to the roots of community. Even if we can't produce energy. In any given community, there is a massive spread of wealth. There'll be some people in your community that have an enormous amount of capital, and maybe they can do something to support people in our community. We've got to start thinking differently about how we live our lives and thinking differently about how we tackle these major systemic issues. So I get it. I would be happy to join a protest and express my anger about the situation, but ultimately, right now, need to think about how we can create long-term solutions, get creative, and transcend our current predicament. It's not easy. The energy situation is not easy, but what we need to do is start anticipating it getting worse, because it's likely to. The economic trends are not looking good. But the reality is this: it's the old adage, if you kill the monster whilst it's in its infancy, you prevent it from growing into a beast. And right now, if energy inflation can be curbed, then you prevent a knock-on effect on everything else. Because as I mentioned, businesses are going to raise their prices. The prices of all goods and services are going to rise. Then you're going to see major double-digit inflation, which isn't caused by economic growth. It's not caused by productivity. It's not caused by innovation and creativity. It's caused by price rises alone, driven by one specific utility. And that's a really messy situation to get into, because we're going to see double-digit inflation. We'll see rising interest rates, which curb the cost of borrowing. It incentivizes savings, so you get a contractionary environment, and you get stagflation, and that's a very tricky position to be in. Now, fortunately, all of these things have happened before. Humans are supposed to have evolved, and to some degree we've evolved because of the way we've been able to create technology and advance our quality of life to some degree. But we fall into the same trap, the same cycles over and over and over again. There's a fantastic set of videos by a guy called Ray Dalio going around on the internet right now. I'm going to try and get him onto the podcast. He's a bit of a heavy hitter, serial billionaire. But if we can get him on the show to explain some of these market cycles, he is one of the best at explaining exactly how these market cycles operate and why we keep falling into the same patterns. But we do. It's the human condition. So this is why really I created Elevate. Elevate is about how do we elevate our thinking? How do we elevate our predicament? How do we elevate beyond the status quo to actually look at how we do things differently? And I firmly believe, and I've used this analogy multiple times in the last couple of years when I've been in rooms full of people, whether it's activists, entrepreneurs, or our community, and said, I believe the answers are in the room. And that's a metaphor for the idea that the answers are within each of us. The answers to each of the problems that we're facing are within each one of us. And if we create the right conditions and the right space to actually tap into that creativity, to step out of fear, to get into abundance and away from scarcity, because the whole world right now is in this contractionary, scarce phase, food scarcity, energy scarcity. The reality is we have to change the way we see things for things to change. And for those of you who are willing to be one of those people, then together we can really start to come up with solutions. And I think right now there's no greater time than now for us to get together in our communities and start taking simply blank page approaches to the challenges that we're facing and the challenges that have gone before us, because they require resolutions too, especially what's happened in the last couple of years. And we've got to start thinking creatively. We've got to create the space to do that, because nothing great ever comes from a place of fear and scarcity. Anyone who started their own business will know that if you're in fear and scarcity, you rarely make the best decisions. And we live in a world right now which is full of catastrophization, alarmism, hysteria, sensationalism, big headlines. And some of it is real, right? The cost of living headlines I'm sharing with you, they're real. They're going to have a real effect on people's lives. But if we allow that to permeate our psychology and get into our psyche, then we don't have the ability to think clearly. And often when we look at situations like this, we just draw on solutions from the past. There's loads of articles right now saying, let's not, pursue failed solutions from history. This is an opportunity to think creatively and think about things that don't even exist yet. Think about approaches to energy, thinking about approaches to how we live our lives, thinking about approaches to politics. The capacity is within us. This could be the greatest time in history if we allow it to be. We have to start thinking differently about the situation we find ourselves in. So I understand how stressful it is. I'm thinking about my own bills going forward. It's these price rises are crazy. I've got a young child. I've got a new startup. Elevate is a brand new organization. I've got bills to pay. I've got a team to pay for. These things are going to put pressure on all of us, but that pressure can be turned into diamonds. I know it's a cliche, but we have to take that pressure and transform it into a force for good and a force for positivity and a force for change. Here's our opportunity. This is our opportunity. And this is why in the coming months, my brand Elevate, we're going to come out on across the UK. We're running a tour. We're going to get across the nation. We're calling it the Raise the Nation Tour. We need to raise our energy. We need to raise our game. We need to rise above our situation to start looking for solutions. So we're running a pilot event coming up in Bristol on the 6th of September. It's going to be a very small event. We're going to be testing our content. We're going to be having a small number of people in the room to share the message that we want to take out on tour and refine it and start to look at how we can bring communities together on a local level to start solving some of these problems. But then we want to get out. We want to go and see as many communities as we can to start bringing people together, to start recognizing that when we put our minds together, we can solve challenges. It's about breaking through and transcending and elevate beyond our differences to look at how we can start to come together in communities and form solutions. The answers are out there. They're within us. And I believe that together we can create change. So if you're interested in being part of our tour, head over to weareelevate.org. It's a private social network. If you're on Facebook or you're on any other any other major social network, you'll know what a social network is. We have a private social network. We don't have any algorithms, but it's a community of people who are committed to looking at how we can create changes or solutions in particular to many of the issues we're facing right now. Because sometimes when you talk about change frightens some people. From what we've gone through the last couple of years, sometimes it's about progress, yes, and advancing things and changing things and creativity and innovation. But we also need to think about what do we conserve and what do we preserve? Because at this moment in time, freedom of speech, individual human rights, our freedoms, our ability to make individual choices, our individual sovereignty. These are things that we need to preserve, So preservation is the other side of the equation when it comes to change. We need to look at both sides of that equation to understand what are we conserving right now and what are we progressing, what are we changing. So we'll be coming out to talk about all of these things on a tour across the United Kingdom and further afield. We've got dates in Austria now as well in September. There's a chance that we could be coming out to other countries as well, but we're going to be focused initially on the UK, the Raise the Nation tour. We'd love you to be part of our community. So come over to weareelevate.org. We're looking for a whole group of volunteers to help us run this tour. It's going to be a massive endeavor. We need people to help us find venues. We need to help people go and fly the towns and cities that you live in. We need people to help us organize conversations with media. We need to find partners. So if you're someone who's got a get stuff done attitude and you're hungry to make a difference in the world around you right now, and you want to contribute to something meaningful, you want to help bring people together in their communities to start thinking creatively about change, you want to help people to find the potential within themselves to step into their power so that finally we can reclaim our power rather than just giving it all away to the government and the corporations. If that sounds like you and you want to be part of that and you are committed, because we always get people say, I want to help, and then they disappear when it comes to actually doing stuff. If you're committed and willing and able to help us run the tour, no matter how small an action, we need help to get this off the ground and to get out into the road. We want to make this a huge story. We want to get out into the UK, bring people together and start working on solutions. So if you'd like to be part of that journey, first step, join us on weareelevate.org. We've got a private group in there, which is for our regional group ambassadors who are helping us to put on the tour. If you want to be part of that, come and join us. But in the coming days and weeks, we'll be sharing the full details of the tour. We're putting a website together. We're creating a trailer. We're going to be sharing the message, and we'll involve all of you in that too. Now is the time for us to get together. We can keep lobbying the government. We can keep rallying, and we should do that. But ultimately, until we start to come together and actually develop solutions on a local basis, then things won't change. If we want things to change, then we have to bring the change. That to me is a done deal. So you want to help out, come and join us. If not, we'll see you on the tour. We're making some noise. I'm in London next week for the final date of the political hustings. Sunak and Truss, I've got a press pass to go and visit the final day of the debate. I'm going to be in London. I'm going to be interviewing people on the streets. I'm going to be talking to people about how they're seeing the world and what we can do to do things differently. Be running a range of interviews and podcasts whilst I'm out there. So come and see us in London next Wednesday. The tour begins. The pilot day at the tour is on the Tuesday, the 6th of September in Bristol. We'll be publishing the details of that, and then we'll be finalising the full dates of the full tour as we start to get things moving. So, really excited. The change is in our hands. We're looking for people out there to help us lead change. I believe the power is within each of us. You know, we're living increasingly busy lives, but when we club together, strength in numbers, we can make a real difference. So yeah, let's be real about what's going on. Let's keep making sense of what the challenges we're facing, but let's switch our minds to solutions. You know, if you think the government is going to come and save you, good luck. You know, keep campaigning. Someone's got to. But in the meantime, let's think differently. And let's even start thinking about, you know, what if we had a blank page and you wanted to redesign what the political system looks like? Let's have that conversation too. All right. Have a great weekend, all. Peace and love. Have an awesome day. Hopefully the sun is shining wherever you are.